Well, good evening, and a very warm welcome to our Rights Talk today, which is on African women's voices, female genital mutilation, and women's leadership. And it's just terrific to have so many people in the audience today, friends from all across the Australian community, including human rights activists, medical fraternity, people from state and federal, and of course members from all communities around Australia. So it's fantastic to have so many committed, interested and determined people in the room, and a particular welcome to our panel tonight. To have Juliana Necramo, we have as one of our speakers. She's a great friend of the Commission, and I'll introduce her more formally in a minute. Mabel Imali Izolio, who's come all the way from Kenya, I have to say, so you thought you came a long way. You haven't travelled anywhere compared to Mabel. And to have Marianisa and Kajija Galaba to also come and talk about the great work that is happening here in Australia to really work around the issue of FGM so that the prevention efforts that all Australians care about are put in place. But I do want to start by acknowledging that we're meeting here on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to thank them for their custodianship of the land and loving care of the land for so many thousands of years, and also to pay respect to their elders past and present. It's been terrific tonight to be able to convene the session tonight with the African Women Australia, which is the organisation which Juliana is heading up, and it's an incredible organisation. I've had numerous interactions with African women all across this country. I know there was, even in Choggum, there was a lot of advocacy by African Australian women. And I think the organisation is such a great example of women's leadership in Australia, because what we see in that organisation is a network of trained and experienced women advocates from African backgrounds who engage on issues, not just issues affecting African women in their communities, but much more broadly than that. And not just here in Australia, but we work with the African Women Australia in the United Nations and in other international forums. And one of the strengths of a network is that they do a lot of capacity building and training. And in this vein, it's been fantastic to see them undertake more recently, and coming off the back of a national summit on FGM just last year, but to undertake a number of new initiatives for FGM leaders. And this one that you'll hear about tonight has been taken in conjunction with Southwestern Sydney Institute of TAFE, the Granville College. And I mean, congratulations to Granville College for stepping up and engaging with good NGOs on this particular issue. So the good thing is we've got some participants of the program who will share with us a little bit about their involvement tonight. And importantly, Granville College is running a full-day conference tomorrow on this issue, which is entitled Our Bodies, Our Voices, Our Lives Conference, the FGM program, and it's being held at TAFE Granville College in Sydney. So if it is something you're particularly interested in, I'm sure you could talk to our panel afterwards and they can talk to you about how they might be able to arrange your attendance. I do have some apologies from those who really wanted to attend, but you'll know it's a sitting week in Parliament this week and it's so hard to kind of get a pass out. So there were people like the Senator Michaelia Cash, who you'll know is our current Minister for Women, who's deeply committed to work in this area, and also the Honourable Philip Ruddock, and also Tanya Plibersek, who you may remember was the Minister for Women under the previous Labor government. Today we're going to talk about leadership and what that looks like, and particularly in relation to African Australian women. We know that women's voices and agency are absolutely critical to promoting and protecting their human rights and to addressing any violation of their rights that women might experience. And it's interesting, I have the honour of sitting on the World Bank's Gender Board, and just last week we brought out a report, Voice and Agency, Empowering Women and Girls for Shared Prosperity. It was an exciting time at the board actually, because Hillary Clinton launched our report, and in terms of an advocate for strong women's voice, particularly on global security, on peace and women's empowerment, and you know, she's a great example. But our report highlighted how women's voices, and that is women speaking out, but not just speaking out, women being heard and influencing decisions, and how women's agency, that is our ability to make decisions about our own life, our ability to live free from violence or retribution, that these things are fundamental to achieving gender equality and realising women's rights all across the world. So the fact is we need to promote women's leadership if we are to see change in women's lives. It's pretty much as simple as that. And as we'll hear today from our panel, it's women's voices, women's agency and women's leadership that's central to addressing important human rights issues like female genital mutilation. FGM has been recognised as a violation of women's and girls' human rights. It is a form of discrimination against women and as a form of gender-based violence, as recognised by the CEDAW treaty body. The UN has recognised that member states, so that's nations all across the world, have an obligation to take measures to address and eliminate FGM. FGM impacts on a number of basic human rights for women. It obstructs our right to life, our right to health, our right to freedom from injury, our right to torture, cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment and violence, as well as discrimination against women and rights of the girl child. So it's not just one right, it has the potential to impact on a number of our basic human rights. And in 2013, in April, the Australian government convened what was essentially the first national summit on FGM. We all went down to Canberra and they engaged so many different stakeholders. And many of the people that are here today were fortunate enough to attend. And it was pleasing to see that the summit really lifted the awareness and understanding of FGM as a key issue in the Australian environment. Because I think there's a view, oh, well, that's not Australia's issue, this is an issue happening elsewhere. Well, that summit put this issue front and centre on Australia's agenda. And it also helped people to understand that there's no one approach. It's not necessarily about legislation or by itself. There's so many elements to working with communities around FGM, working across governments. And with individuals. And it was really pleasing to see this year, a few of us here went to the Commission on the Status of Women, which is a big gender equality meeting in the United Nations, which happens in March every year. And this year, in the agreed conclusions that every nation, so 193 nations across the world signed on to, the agreed conclusions called on all governments across the world to eliminate all harmful practices, including child early and forced marriage and female genital mutilation, through reviewing, adopting, enacting and enforcing laws and regulations that prohibit such practices, through creating awareness about the harmful health consequences and generating social support for the enforcement of laws. So I think tonight's event is a great opportunity to hear from people who really have a deep understanding of this issue and to engage and learn and share ideas about how we can change the future. So before I introduce our speakers, what we're going to do, the Minister who's deeply committed to this issue has sent us a short video which we will now screen. So this is Senator Michaelia Cash, who some of you will know and have met. She's the Minister assisting the Prime Minister on Women, and we'll hear what she has to say now. Thank you. Or not, depending on what the technology is doing. We can see it, we're not hearing it.
This session on female genital mutilation or FGM as it's known, and women's leadership discuss issues. I send my best wishes to everyone attending African Women's Voices. This session on female genital mutilation, or FGM as it's known, and women's leadership discuss issues that I take a deep personal interest in. Australia is committed to being at the forefront of efforts to promote the empowerment of women and girls on a global scale. One of the major impediments to the advancement of women and girls is the prolific nature of violence against them, including female genital mutilation. These three words make many Australians recoil in horror. but we must speak them. Avoiding talking about female genital mutilation will not make it go away. All girls deserve the right to be free from torture and mutilation. And it is only through speaking out, raising awareness, and unveiling the shame and secrecy around this process that we may begin to change the minds of those who believe it is a necessary and normal part of girlhood. FGM is recognised by the United Nations and other international organisations as a human rights violation. It is an illegal practice in Australia, but we know many women and girls in this country are still affected by it. In 2010, the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne reported it was seeing between 600 and 700 cases of women each year who were victims of female genital mutilation. I recently addressed the 58th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, where I was able to assert Australia's position on FGM. It was here that I witnessed firsthand the remarkable efforts of many African nations in taking steps towards ending this practice. While we commend the strong African leadership and the real momentum for change in eliminating FGM, we all have more work to do worldwide. Our government is supporting Australians affected by female genital mutilation overseas by providing information for Australian travellers on FGM laws and training materials for consular officers posted overseas to better support women and girls affected by this practice and to ensure reporting of possible cases. We have also conducted a review of Australia's legislative framework to consider whether existing legislative provisions are effective in comprehensively criminalising FGM. But we are aware that legislation alone cannot change this embedded cultural practice. As you know, cultural change also comes from community awareness and education. In 2013, Australia convened a national summit on eliminating FGM, resulting in a national compact on FGM. Through the Commonwealth Department of Health, we currently fund 15 projects aimed at raising awareness, training for health professionals, and building an evidence and research base on the practice of female genital mutilation in Australia. We know that in order to reduce violence against women and their children, including female genital mutilation, attitudes around gender equality and violence need to change. This requires a concerted effort from every single person in the community. And this is why we believe national efforts, such as Australia's national plan to reduce violence against women and their children, are essential. We are well on our way to developing the second action plan under the national plan, which will have a greater focus on the needs of diverse groups of women, including Indigenous women, women from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and women with disability. I am particularly excited about building support across all sectors of the community. I want to engage more individuals, sectors and government portfolios to make the elimination of violence against women a truly national and community priority. All women and girls deserve the right safety and security and to live free from violence. I wish you all the best for a productive session tonight, and a special thanks and warm welcome to the women who are sharing their personal stories.
Great, thanks. So as you can see, the Ministry has a real personal commitment to this issue as well. So, and the education initiatives, the initiatives that she has supported, I think will continue, and that's great when you've got government support. But now I'm really delighted to have the founder of the African Women Australian Organisation, Juliana Nkrumah, with us here tonight. Juliana is a good friend of the Commission. Some of you may have seen her in her other roles. She's been the coordinator of the New South Wales Police Force's Multicultural Community Liaison Officer program, which I have to say has had outstanding success. And she's done that role since July 2008. And in addition to her long history of working with refugee support services within the New South Wales Government, Juliana's been an active advocate in the women's movement in Australia since the late 1980s, and she's been involved at local, regional and international levels, including pursuing Australia's women's participation in the Commission on the Status of Women process. So it's a delight to have you here tonight, Juliana, to talk to us, and congratulations on all the fabulous work you do. Thanks.
Good evening. Elizabeth, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the acknowledgement to countries. I don't think we'll continue doing acknowledgement to country for the rest of the evening. Look, tonight my role here is to talk about African Australian women and their voices, their leadership, and the whole issue of their rights as well. But I want to couch that in the work that has fueled African Women in Australia and continues to allow us to do the work we do with very little. I was very excited to hear the Minister talk about the national plan, and I think what the Minister didn't talk about was the fact that African Women in Australia is one of the 11 organizations around Australia that were invited to put up their proposal for work on female genital mutilation for this round of funding. Now, the reason why we did that was because since our inception in 2005, we have believed that African women in Australia are leaders in their own right. But on arrival to Australia, we face a number of barriers that hinder the expression of our leadership. And I knew there were a lot of women who were literally sitting on their leadership skills and needed to be able to be encouraged to come out of their breaches into the center and use those skills in order to enhance their communities, themselves and others. So we went out to look at how do we help African women to come out and really do what they need to do. These were women who were politicians in their countries. These were women who were community leaders, mothers, teachers, etc. And they come to Australia and they just go, this is a new country, I just need to survive. So that sort of process that we undertook was a difficult one because a lot of African women were coming into Australia as refugees. So a lot of people were thinking that refugees, had nothing to give. And we were having to encourage people to understand that even if you don't come, you come as a refugee, you've got something to give. So let's look at the diversity of people who have come as African women to Australia and look at the fact that there is a diverse range of ethnicities amongst them. There are people who hold double or multiple ethnicities for that matter, regardless of the multiple cultures. In the sense that they've lived in one country, they are born of other people, and they've moved to another country and grown up there. But there's also multiplicity of life expectations. And then there's the route of entry into Australia. Either you're a migrant, a refugee, or a student, or an international student, or just a skilled migrant. And a lot of people look at Africans as they are all refugees. But in actual fact, if you look at the population of Africans in Australia, there are more skilled migrants than there are refugees. And also, there are a lot of us who are first-generation parent Africans and really finding difficulty in living the normal day-to-day living. And everybody is supporting Africans as refugees by giving them the basic needs, right? Everybody will give you a blanket and a bit of food and whatever, and expect you to continue holding out your hands for help. So when you come to another level, when you lift the argument, when you lift the whole status to another level and you say, no, thank you very much, we will continue to take whatever you can give to us, or we will struggle to work hard to get whatever we need to give and contribute economically to the society, but there is a need for us to move higher. There is a need for us to go to the point where we begin to exert our leadership, where we came, asking where we left from and came to Australia. So African women are depicted and treated in the media in a way that makes it really difficult for them, and that is the area in which our voices are left to go unheard. I was very grateful that the Australian Human Rights Commission did that research that Maria Dimopolis did in 2012. Yeah, and Maria's, the research that says our voices, isn't it? And I forget the name of the research. Yeah, it's like in our own words. Yes, in our own words. And it looks like we've been talking about voices for a very long time, but we've really come into our own. Now, in our own words was also a space in which people were able to certainly get the opportunity to come around and have a conversation about what is happening to us. Then soon after that, African Women Australia did courts of testimonies, where we allowed men and women to come together and talk about their experiences of racism and look at how to use human rights framework to exert their agency and to be able to speak up about the issues around racism. So how do we get talked about? Africans get talked about a lot. I'm glad that in this space we are not being talked about, but we are talking too. We are doing the talking. And it's like, once you talk about people, you tell people that African women are going to be doing the talking, it's like, what are they going to talk about? Well, you know, this evening we're going to talk about something, but tomorrow we're going to talk about even more. So, you know, if you haven't applied, registered for the conference, please do, because it's an opportunity for you to hear us talking the way we want to talk. So we are looked at through a stereotype situation where it's like African women are only good for models. I don't look like one guy. It's the exotic African woman, right? Okay, that's not all that we are about. Then it's about the role and impact of patriarchy on us. Every African woman is seen through the lenses of patriarchy. There is a lot of impact of patriarchy on our lives. However, it's not all African women who come from a patriarchal society. So that's also one of our diversities. There's also a lot of conversations about how domestic violence is like the other name that we wear. Okay, that is true. There's a lot of domestic violence in our community, so it is in every other community. So if we focus on that, then it means we are focusing on that to the detriment of other things that we are good at. Then there's also the dreaded female circumcision. Now, I'm going to use female circumcision and not female genital mutilation, just because we have come through a process in our training where women are saying, let's talk about the language. Let's talk about the language that is being used here. So in talking about our voices, it's about what is our voice around FGM. And our voice around FGM is, thank you very much, but we would rather you call it female circumcision. That is, whether you like it or not. It's not because we are using any euphemisms here. We are telling you that this is ours. This is our body. And our voice says it's female circumcision. Don't you argue with me. Just take it as it is, because it's about the respect that we want you to give to us. Okay, in the briefings and in the documentation, we will allow you to do that. But when you come to have a conversation with us and when we go to have a conversation with our communities, it's female circumcision, because that's the only language that our people understand. Does that make sense? So that is, in a way, being respectful. Now, what is respectful about female genital mutilation? Well, there is a lot of respect about it. You know, language is one of the things we are going to put in our code of conduct. Tomorrow we are launching a code of ethical practice around female genital mutilation. We are. And we will have the code out to the Human Rights Commission and to all the agencies who matter. Because African women are saying that we would like you to speak like this about this, we would like you to look at this the way we want to see it. And that is not because we want to keep this as a very precious thing that we do, that we don't want anybody to do anything about. It's only because we have had a long time to think through it, talk about it, analyze it in a human rights framework through the human rights lenses, and we've come to the point where we want to say, now we want to take the center stage around this debate. And we want to take the center stage around this debate from a knowledgeable position, a position of knowledge. The women who have been through our program, and our program is called Our Voices, Filling the Gaps, FGM Spokespersons Program. Since February, a group of women from across the Eastern Seaboard have been studying and the take around the human rights framework and all the human rights implications of the practice, and using those lenses upon their own practice, talking to their communities about what they are learning and bringing back, right back those voices to us. That's why we can have the code of conduct. Some women and men in our community have also been in a place where the colonial impact is very strong on the way we behave. There's for a long time been the sense of, this is not my country, I don't belong here. We will never be accepted. We will be grateful for what we get. Some have accepted patriarchy and colonial patronizing and the patron-client relationship as the way things should be. We are also caught up in certain parts of our culture that says a girl is only good for marriage and childbearing. And over and above that, a girl who is married who cannot have a child is not a right woman. So all this sort of, hidden agendas are things that women go through, and they sit on it quietly. African Women Australia is creating the spaces for those issues to be brought to the fore and to be discussed hourly amongst ourselves. But do we do that all by ourselves without support? We don't. We have a lot of other agencies that we work with. We've created a lot of networks. So for this project, we have consortium organizations who are members of our consortium, like Multicultural Center for Women's Health in Melbourne, the Muslim Women's Center for Human Rights in Melbourne, and other agencies like JERA International, and in New South Wales we've got HADA, the Horn of African Development Association. In Queensland we've got Family Planning Queensland, and in New South Wales again we've got Immigrant Women Speak Out, Immigrant Women's Health Association. So these are all the groups that we connect with in order to be able to do the work that we do. We also, through the issue of voices, want to grow the confidence of our community, because you cannot declare anything from your position without a sense of confidence. We also want to, before people grow confidence, they have to have a sense of self-belief. So we want people to understand that it's important to believe that what you have to say and what you have to contribute is important. So go out there and contribute in the right space and with the right knowledge behind you. And finally, we are also bent on influencing decisions. So when you look at our vision as African Women Australia, our vision is to grow women who understand the Australian system in order to effectively participate in the socio-political and economic life of Australian society. What we are saying is that we are here, we're not going nowhere, and because we're not going nowhere, we want to take our talents, abilities, and skills and want to come right into the center and contribute to Australia. And we want to do that in a place where we understand what our rights are, our responsibilities are, and the rights of the other people around us. So let me end here with that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Juliana. I don't think you get a more shining example of women's leadership in Australia than Juliana Nakamo. So once again, a round of I think Juliana just shows us what's possible when women's voices are not silenced. And that's why we all need to work in whatever community we exist in, whatever spheres of influence, to ensure that women's voices are not silenced. And I love your comments around patriarchy and domestic violence, because they are happening in all communities right here in Australia. We don't have to go to the nations of Africa or the Middle East or Papua New Guinea. We should be looking right here in our own backyard if we want some examples of domestic violence and violence against women. So it's such a great point. I'm delighted now to introduce to you our next speaker, who, as I said, has flown all the way from Kenya to be with us tonight. Mabel Imali Izolia works on gender equality, women's rights, women's empowerment across various nations across Africa. And once again, she's working on female circumcision, women's leadership and other issues. She's a leader in her own right, and she brings with her a wealth of experience in working with women from countries in Africa, including Tanzania, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Malawi, Liberia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, just to name a few. So we're so very honoured to have you join us today, Mabel, and I'd love to welcome you up to the stage.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be in Australia. This is my first time to be here, and I'm already enjoying the climate very much because it isn't different from Kenya. I think it's the same. When I came, I was told it would be winter, and I found the winter is just like the one in Kenya. So I want to start by saying that Julie has already made very, very tremendous background about where the women's leadership is, and has touched quite a bit on issues around female genital circumcision. And I do want to insist on that one because mutilation gives a very, very negative perspective. In Kenya, for example, when we were up with the women trying to fight this practice, some men even ridiculed and said, no, it is not mutilation. We are actually modifying it for you to look better. Now, you can imagine how that can hurt, particularly for somebody who has gone through that experience and which experience has undermined their professional growth and even quality of life. So my presentation today is simply to identify which are these key issues for the African woman in Australia or in Africa, which are the issues that are affecting African women, both in their home countries and in the diaspora. Now, I might begin with something that might look very, very basic, but I want to start with a quote that some of you might know. It's about a famous physicist called Albert Einstein. And he said once that the world we have is a product of our own thinking. It can only change if we change our way of thinking. And I find a lot of satisfaction in that because a lot of people that do promote the violation of the rights of women have taken those violations as a lifestyle. And we are here as women who would like to see women stand up for their rights, claim those rights, live those rights, enjoy those rights to the fullest, including a life without female genital circumcision. One of the things that I would like to talk about is the fact that women across the world, not just in Australia, are not different, be they white, be they red, be they yellow, be they black. They all have the same experiences. In some of the communities where I have talked to women, and if you put them in a particular place and begin to talk about the violations they experience, put a white woman here, put an Asian here, put a black woman here, and you begin to write a book. Within 1 hour, they'll continue writing the sentence. They will say, I was beaten by this, and then the white woman will say, in fact, he battered me and I lost my tooth. And the black woman will say, I actually lost my eye, and it will continue, and the book will be full within 1 hour. So the experiences are the same anywhere in the world. And so I want to emphasize, basically, for example, on the immigrant women and those who have come to Australia as refugees. I want to say that one of the issues that are affecting these women is about religious fundamentalism. You might ask, what has that got to do with the female genital circumcision? It has a lot of relevance to that because when women experience female genital circumcision at that very early age, they do not continue with their lives compared to other women who have gone directly through school and have progressed in their professions. And as a result, they have a lot of unmet expectations. And because of that, they want to have fortunes come through any other way. And some of them have gone as far as leaning to pastors and believing that pastors can do actually fortunes, can make miracles for them. When some of these pastors actually are some of the poorest, and they live their lives giving the pastors all the monies that they earn from all the hard work, and the pastors may end up having 4 holidays back into their home countries, and they will never have a holiday even in the next 10 years, even in the next 20 years from now. So that's an issue that I really want us to think about. Let's not focus so much on people who cannot change our lives. Remember, I said the things we have, the things we can change are in our minds. We need to do that. Then we have got also cultural fundamentalism. And the cultural fundamentalism is where the FGMs, the female genital circumcision sits. Because of that, we'll find a lot of families, even from here, going back to their home countries when it's a season to undertake the cut. And they go and take their girls so that when they come back, they already feel that they are grown-up women and they forget about education, and some of them may end up on the streets because they do not have a good living. They may end up becoming child mothers, and at the expense of maybe elderly men who will take advantage of our life. In other words, to exploit them. There is, and that has to do with a lot of work that is related to sex work, because we do not want to look at it as if it exists, but it does exist. In another word, we are taking our children to the streets. We are sending them to the streets to do sex work just because we have taken them through the female genital circumcision and they have grown up too early, and we are also leaving them on their own. There is also alcoholism. And with alcoholism, there are a lot of families who are apathetic about their life. They take to drinking to escape the realities of life. And in the process, some of them actually end up being drug addicts. They get up into criminal activities. And as a result, again, things are not good for them. That is linked again to intergenerational gap. Because a lot of the families now, and look, and when I talk about families, read mothers, because mothers are the primary socializing agents for the child. We have got absentee mothers, we have got absentee parents, and we cannot be able to communicate. I know of children who have not seen their parents for a long time because they're working almost 24 hours. They're changing a job here, the next job, because they need to make ends meet. And even those parents are also suffering from some kind of phobia of not being close to their children. So by the time they come home, they cannot even be able to hug their children. They think that it is foreign, and they cannot be able to understand what they call the digital language. The children are talking another language, they're talking a different language. Everything is becoming very difficult. These are some of the issues that are actually affecting women in the diaspora as well as back home. So that disconnect is very, very important for us to deal with as women leaders. I want to now talk about the violence against women. Let's go to this next. Down. Violence against women. Yeah. I'm moving a little past this. Go down. Okay, but I can continue to talk about what the violence against women is a global phenomenon. It's already grounded in international human rights conventions, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms against Discrimination against Women, CEDAW, and we have got other human rights instruments that speaks to the fact that violence should not be limited to women. And here, I want to specifically mention about the psychological violence that most of us women go through. This one has got no face, be it a professional woman, be it a professor, be it a lawyer, be it a doctor, they will never talk about it. But they experience a lot of violence in the home. And particularly violence that they feel ashamed to talk about. Let me give an example of an experience sharing that a respondent gave to us in one of the researches that we are conducting on transitional justice. This woman said, oh, for the 32 years that I've been married, I did not talk and I have not talked and I was not going to talk until you came to me. Because when I came into this married relationship, my husband never told me that you are going to have sex in any other way other than the normal one that I knew. And for the 32 years, this man actually subjected the wife to sex through the backside and only related with her when he wanted her to conceive. And because of her religion, she was told that if you die, and she was very sickly, if you die before you talk about this, you are not going to go to heaven. So one time she revealed to her daughter that I've got a problem. I know I'm going to die, but this is happening. So the daughter now called us counselors, they talked to her and they revealed. Now, why am I saying this? Because in many marital relationships, women do not speak. Women do not say. Women can have bottles being entered into their private parts to reveal any other information they have discussed with the other women, and they will not talk. We know it. And this is something that we need to consider. The economic violence. When we are talking about economic violence, we need to consider the issues of paid and unpaid work. A lot of women do multiple roles. We call it in gender terms the triple role of women. In fact, it's now the quadruple role of women because we have the reproductive work, which is unpaid. We have the productive work, which is paid. We have community work where the community as such expects a woman to do certain jobs. For example, among Africans, for you, a woman, if your husband dies and you don't cry, you don't show that you actually love this man, it's going to be very difficult. You can even be divorced. That's part of the role of a woman, which is unpaid. But how many men will cry when the wife has died? He might find himself in a bus saying, oh, let me get one beer for the road because I'm very stressed. Or he might even go and get another friend before the woman is married and say, what could the woman have done? What could the man have done? He's very stressed. So these are some of the dynamics that we need to look at when women are experiencing economic violence, particularly the work that they do that is unpaid. And for women who are refugees and for immigrant women, you are doing all this work and under the man who will take all this money, perhaps invest it back home, and they will never acknowledge that you are the one who has been working for it. And you'll even be beaten to give away that money. Becky one time said that poverty does not have color, and we need to understand that even for African women, we should not shy away. We must fight poverty in all entirety. We stand up to get money, invest, and have the property in our own names, not in my husband's name, or at most, or at the very least, in joint names, but never in your husband's name, particularly if you have produced 100% of it and you give it away. This is what African women have been doing. They do the work and they don't get rewarded. And even before they know it, and this usually happens when the man has died, you'll find many other women who have come and they are calling it themselves Mrs. Isolio, Mrs. Isolio, Mrs. Isolio. Very many of them. So it's very, very important for us to be careful. Women and decision making, that's another issue. Women the decisions is just amazing. They do not make decisions at very, very, very different levels. Again, in this same research that I've referred you to, there is a different woman who said, women, we are not appreciated and do not make decisions in our homes. We are also treated as children in our matrimonial homes. Where is the word of women? When will they make decisions about their own body, their own life, and their own well-being? We are saying that women must make decisions about First of all, how you relate with the husband. I don't know how many women in this. I don't know about the white women, but I've got a lot of experience about black women and even women of Asian origin who find it difficult, even when they need the husband, to tell him, I need you tonight. How many of us say that? I need you. I really need you tonight. Most of us will wait when the man says, please. Otherwise, you suffer. You feel you want to have the man, and you don't say it. Why do we do that? You are a human being. You are denying yourself your right. You are convinced your right. Why must you wait for the man to do? Why must you be dictated by the man? Because then that is his love, not your love. The other thing is about negotiation. And this one I've already mentioned about it, negotiation out of relationship that you find inappropriate, and also decision about the sizes of the family that you would like to make. And I'm saying this because, again, I like to draw from my experience in Malawi. We met a family, several families that were trying out, pretesting the use of the female condom. And it was just bad luck that these men, when they went to see, it's a fishing community. By the time they got there, the tide was very high, and they drowned. And so the women were asked to identify their husbands. And in that particular community, they are mixed. Some circumcised, others don't circumcise. So the women were asked, then they removed the bodies and they brought them there for them to come and identify their own husbands. Of course, they were naked. They had only the pants when they had gone into the water. They are little solemn, so they tore up the pants. And the women were being asked, "Can you tell us, is this one yours?" They checked the body, they checked the scars. If they know any particular scar, they said no. They went everywhere. Now they came to the penis. Is this one yours? Is this one yours? Is this one yours? No. All the 5 men were drowned. You know the reason they could not be able to say which penis belonged to them? It is because these women, whenever they're having a sexual relationship with their husbands, they close the door, they put off the light, they enter the blanket, they close their eyes, and they never know what enters them. So this becomes very difficult because how do you know when you get infected? This is your right as a woman. And if you don't know how your man looks like, and you don't know how your body looks like, it becomes very difficult even for you to forget issues and the rights of women. I want to finally conclude this by saying that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 gives women, provides for women to be at the peace table. Because women are vulnerable in situations of conflict. But we know also that most of the time when the situation arises, they have been relegated, they do not come at the peace table. And it's the same things that even during conflicts in the home, when they want to resolve, you be put aside and told you cannot be able to talk. So we are saying that as women in this country, we need to negotiate, we need to struggle, we need to advocate for ourselves to be at the peace table at any one level, be it at the family level, be it at the national level, and even at the local level and the international level. So what can we do to address all these questions that I've been talking about, all these issues? We are saying we need to partner with supportive government, private sector and the community groups to create awareness on the issues of concern to the communities, to the women that we are talking about, to their families. We also need to partner with like-minded NGOs who can provide support to women's emerging leaders to undertake advocacy and the lobby policy makers to address these identified issues of women's disempowerment, of women's lack of decision-making, of women's mobility and all this. And then we have to provide continuous awareness question also on the effects of cultural practices which have been overtaken by time, especially female genital circumcision. And we are saying that because of that, we need to insist on these communities that do practice FGM to embrace alternative rights of passage. If by going through FGM means you are getting gifts, then we can insist on alternative rites of passage. People can bring you gifts if that's how you want to grow up. And I say this with a lot of sadness. I want to end on this because at one time when I was growing up, my brothers, when they got circumcised, there was a big party. Everybody came home and the clothes were bought. So I asked my mother, how come when I have grown up you cannot ask people? And then she told me, when did you notice that you have grown up? Then I told him, you know, even yesterday, remember I was showing you, I had my first period. How can you talk about that? Say that. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anyone that you have your periods. Keep quiet. Now you can see the differential treatment. Why should my growing up not be celebrated and the one for a man to be celebrated? These are the key issues that when we are doing advocacy against female genital circumcision have to be brought on board. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so very much, Mabel, for being such a strong agent of change all across Africa, for bringing real life examples into our discussions, and for inspiring us, because I think one of the things you do so amazingly well is you talk about issues which often, even women, as women ourselves, we can't talk about these issues. There seem to be taboo. There's a social norm that just silences women around these issues. And what you do, and I saw you do it tonight, and I'm sure you do it every day, is you make talk about these issues accessible. And that's what needs to happen, because if we can't talk about it, we can't change it. So thank you so much for coming all the way from Kenya. It's been a great privilege and honour to have you with us tonight. Thank you. So finally tonight we have two of the graduates from Our Voices, Filling in the Gaps, FGM Spokespersons Program. So this is a program that has been running over a period at Granville College. And we've got, and I want to welcome Marion Issa and Kajila Gibala to come and thank them for coming along tonight. It takes courage to stand up and speak, but in speaking out also lies the power for change. So we're really delighted that you're able to come tonight and to talk to us about the program. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. I think the tone has been set by two incredible women. And it's both a privilege and a real duty. We believe that it's a privilege and a duty to be here tonight, because it's so important to have our voices and to be heard. But what we're going to talk to you about is why we participated in this program. I think for me it is because I am a mother, I am a sister, I am an aunt. And one time I was writing my autobiography, and my niece actually told me that I should write about FGM. I didn't want to do it, but she encouraged me, and she said, we need to hear these stories. If you don't do it, who's going to tell us about it? And I think it's really important as mothers to pave the way for our young ones, because if we don't do it again, who's going to do it for them? Our mothers did it to us, and even though we didn't pass it on to our younger generation, which is a real, I think it's very thankful on my part, but other people are still going through it. And it's an issue that has a lot of sensitivity around it. And coming to this program, I think in the beginning we thought that we were suffering alone. But in the closure of coming together from different parts, and not only Africans, but understanding that other people, other cultures were doing it as well, gave us, first of all, an understanding that it's wider, it's bigger than we thought. And then it also allowed us the closure of coming together in a women's circle, which is lost to our world. Women in the past, especially African women, which it's the only women that I know of coming from that culture, we had circles, and women used to empower each other. But over the years, we lost that. And in that loss, I think came the practice went wide and farther. And by finding each other in these spaces now, we understood our problems. And one of the things that Juliana mentioned is the sensitivity around language. It is so important to use the right languages. You know, when you call someone a victim, I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as a survivor, you know? And so simple things, but these simple things has a great impact. And they have the ability to give us the power of change, to allow us to be strong and to put our stories into perspective for the Westerners. When I first came, I worked as an interpreter. And I saw the problems that women were facing. And because we weren't able to talk about our issues, other people were talking for us. And I think that is a great disadvantage. And I feel privileged that we have this space and that we have amazing and powerful women like Juliana, Mabel, and Paula, and all the other women who really took the time and put a lot of effort into this project. And I thank you too for coming and listening to our stories. And I'll pass them to Khadija.
This is why I hate speaking last. They take all the words out of your mouth, and I can't just stand here and say what she said. My own little 2 cents goes like this. I think the shame, stigma, and silence that has surrounded female circumcision is what has allowed it to survive to this day. Shame. Women are always made to feel ashamed for one thing or the other. We wake up every morning, somehow, throughout the day, we feel shame about something. It's like this cloak that we walk around with, guilt. I wanted to be part of this program because I wanted to break this silence. Silence has done nothing for us. Silence hasn't done anything for the little girls who have been put through this horrible practice. Silence hasn't protected them. In fact, silence has ensured that to this day, as we stand here, there's a girl somewhere in the world who is crying, bleeding, and asking for somebody to stop what's happening to her. Silence did that. When we as people are silent in the face of such a profound abuse of women's right to their body, their right to safety, but most of all, our right to our goddamn clitoris, for goodness sake. Who decided that we didn't need a clitoris? Who thought that we were better off? And I'm going to use this title. Female genital mutilation changes your whole life. The trauma doesn't stop when you're held down by your mother or your sister or your auntie or your grandma while some lady comes towards you with a rusty knife or whatever tool she may use to cut off what she considers to be dirty, what she considers to be useless. It doesn't stop there. It continues throughout your life. When you're single, you think, oh, why don't I feel horny like a normal teenager? Then it moves on to now I'm married. Why don't I feel desire for my partner? Then it moves on to why can't I enjoy sex? Then you get pregnant. Then all of a sudden they're telling you there'll be complications because you have had FGM. Then you're having a baby. And then there's problems down there. It's the gift that keeps giving. It just doesn't stop. Every time we have a forum, for most people, they want to hear about FGM because it's scary, it's terrible, they cross their legs. For most of us, it's a reality we can't escape. It doesn't finish when this session finishes. It's part of who we are. But it doesn't define us. Let me just say that. I'm not just FGM. I'm Khadija. I'm a woman. I'm a powerful, strong woman. FGM was done to me, but it's not me. It doesn't control my life. It doesn't determine who I am. It just has implications for how I may live my life. That's all. What has been wonderful about this program was the creation of a space where me and my sisters can come together to mourn. And that sounds strange, but we had tears. For the first time, our truth was our truth. There is diversity in our experiences. It's not all the same. But we were able to recognize the diversity within the diversity. That my narrative is not the same for somebody else. We were able to hold each other's hand and say it's okay. But this was all done with respect and with dignity. I remember when we did our digital stories, Juliana and Paula came to Adelaide to visit me. It was like being in a therapy room. There wasn't a couch where I was lying down with my foot up and saying, well, my life sucks, oh my God. You know, and she's like, what can I do to help you? No, it wasn't like that. She said to me, we needed to record my story. And they asked me, what story did I want to share? I didn't know what story I really wanted to share. But you know what story came out of my mouth? While sitting in that room with two wonderful women who cared about me, who were working as hard as I have to break this silence, I opened up in a way I have never opened up. It was raw and vulnerable. Lying there, I was able to tell them the shame I felt because I did not feel complete. That I felt like I wasn't a woman because of what was done to me. That I didn't identify myself as a sexual being most days because I felt asexual somewhat. I was able to break those walls that said it wasn't okay for me to say that out loud because we should talk about the fluffy stuff. Let's not go deep. No, it's too much. Let's just talk on the surface. I was able to grieve for the things I will never feel. I was able to appreciate the things I was able to actually feel despite what was done to me. In that room, I wasn't a wife, I wasn't a sister, I was a woman. In whatever form that took, I was a woman, and a woman who was sharing my pain. But it wasn't just my pain. It was the pain that we all carry somehow, but don't have the courage to speak up because we're told we should be strong. Women are meant to be strong. Shut up. I mean, seriously. Why can't we just be us for 1 hour a day without having to be strong and having it all together? This program created that space. No money can be put on that. Having a sisterhood, sisters, that I now know I'm not working alone. We're all working towards a common good. And that common good is ensuring that no other girl goes through what we have gone through. Ensuring that talk about FGM in Australia recognizes that while our girls are not white, they're not middle class, They deserve a voice. They deserve to be protected. And they deserve to be heard. In whatever format, they deserve to be heard. And that's why I participated in this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khadija and Marion. I mean, what fabulous examples of what's possible. I mean, there's no question, in the work I do every day, I see just how important young women's voices are. But not only that, that stories are a catalyst for change. It's your stories that will create change in Australia. I'm absolutely sure about that. And it's, you know, courses and groups and women's circles that give women the courage to raise their voice. That's just so important. So it's a combination of all those things, I think, where I see the solutions around female circumcision. And as you said, that up until now, that silence has ensured that girls continue to suffer. And you know what? That's changing. That's absolutely changing. I mean, there's no doubt we all have a role to play in challenging the long-held beliefs that happen in all our countries, in all our societies, in all our cultural groupings. And we can change, you know, the laws, and we can change workplaces, but you know what? Until we change the informal social norms that sit around us and sit in our families, we're not going to have gender equality in any of the nations that exist in the world. So it is, I think, the responsibility of all of us, of all caring professionals, of government, of NGOs, and members of all communities, to make sure that we protect future generation of women and girls from female circumcision and violence against women, much more generally than that. So it's been such a great discussion, really fabulous. We've just got maybe a couple of minutes to open it up for questions or comments. And before I do that, I just also want to acknowledge that we've got 3 other participants in the course, in the Our Bodies, Our Voices, Our Lives, or Our Voices Filling in the Gaps, you know, capacity building workshops. And the 3 other participants that are here, there's Maria, Shadia, and also Intisar. Here at the Human Rights Commission, so thank you so very much. What we might do then is to move over to any questions or comments that we have from the audience tonight. Yeah, and there's one over here. If you could just state your name just when you start.
Hi, my name is Rosie. I'm just wondering, in terms of supporting or helping, other than helping to raise awareness, what's the best way that we support and help?
You know, it's about these women's voices. So tonight I would like to ask Khadija and Maria.
My favorite quote is, I don't even know who the guy was, but that's no matter who the guy was really, who wrote it. It goes along the lines of, all it takes for evil to prevail is a few good men to do nothing. We can talk and talk, and talk has not helped anybody. What I would like to see is action. Raising awareness is all well and good. We need policies. We need laws. We need to ensure that a battalion is sent to protect our girls at the end of the day. What I'm saying is, we need to do whatever it takes and stop soft putting on, what's the word? I always use Aussie words and I never know that. Soft putting around the issue. Thank you. Or coming up with excuses for why we should do what we need to do. To be honest, what someone like you could do, leave here today and tell everybody that you came to a session about FGM or female circumcision, what you thought about it, and how it pissed you off, and how you want to change it. Help us find funding to create the programs that are necessary. Sign a petition that we have coming up which calls Tony Abbott our Minister for Women. Since he loves women so much, maybe it could help our girls. It could actually create the avenues necessary to protect Australian citizens from this and not just think this is an international problem. It's here in our backyard. We can either pretend it's not, or we can do something about it. Let's get Tony Abbott on speaking on the topic. I'll be happy to just go against the guy and see what he says. Maybe do that for me, thank you.
I think one of the reasons why we're talking about voices is because for many, many years, and I would like to make a declaration here. I've been working on FGM since 1994. And I was the first community worker in Australia to be funded by a government agency to work on FGM. So I did a lot of work where there was just a clean canvas for many years. FGM is being spoken about by other people and not the members of the communities. It's time for us to, we can allow people, or we can create the spaces to allow the people to enter those spaces. And as the women said, just being together, the women being together and hearing each other's stories was so empowering, and they were able to forge a way forward. So what we can do is to help to create those spaces. Sometimes people just want a space. Sometimes also they want services. And there's such a dearth of services on FGM in Australia, in the sense that we don't want a medical facility for FGM to be done to people. That's not what we're advocating for. We are advocating for medical facilities that will support the side effects of FGM that people are living with, that they have to contend with on a daily basis. And those side effects are the trauma, the grieving, and people just looking for people who are respectful to be able to go to them and go in confidence, knowing that they will be met with respect first, and then whatever needs to be done will be done for them. So if you're a medical professional, then it's really important that you bring yourself to the place where you want to listen, and not you telling. We don't want to know, we know. No. It's not you telling me that I've got FGM, therefore I've got whatever side defect. I know. Did you know I didn't know? I know. What I need you to know is to just listen, so that you can put your professional hat on as you listen, analyze, come back to me, let's have a conversation, and tell me we have these three options, and refer me on to somebody else who will be equally sensitive. We're looking for those spaces. We're looking for those resources. We're looking for those people who will just help to make a little bit more comfortable for us.
I think it's such a great point that dignity and respect absolutely lies at the heart, and that's what we all want in our lives. So you're absolutely right.
Elizabeth Elliott, I'm a paediatrician. Thank you very much. I think you've provided us with a wonderful forum tonight. Just wondered what sort of support you think you're getting now from the men in your community, because we've alluded to that the importance of the change in attitude across the community.
Should I take this? Yeah, I think through our coming together, things like that have opened up. It is very important to educate our men and to share with them our stories, and not only older men, but even younger men. And it was really amazing when we did these digital stories, and we went into the community to talk with them. So we, and if you come tomorrow to the symposium, it's our second language. Anyway, if you come tomorrow, you will see that we will share some of the digital stories. And what happens is that this something we did different sessions, and some of them were cyber sessions, just to give them that space of and to be anonymous, and to allow them to speak their heart. And it was very interesting because a lot of young people came on board and said, what do we do? What do we do if we marry a girl who has, you know, how do we deal with this issue? How do we be sensitive to that? So the dialogue is happening in that grassroots, yes. And also elder men are being involved. So it's been really amazing what has come out of the whole issue.
I have had numerous conversations with my uncles, you know, on this subject. They don't like me very much, but that's fine. But nobody wants to talk about their sex life. I pretty much did go there and say, you know, what has it been like sleeping with a circumcised woman and somebody who's not circumcised? Lay it on me. Let's have a conversation about this. And you know, it goes back to the issue of back home. They felt like that was okay, and they saw nothing wrong with it. In fact, they were happy to have, you know, to have wives who didn't have desire. It didn't bother them. Women were meant for procreation, have babies. You don't need to enjoy this. It's for me. That's the end of it. And now what my uncles were saying, we're now here, we're liberated, and you know, we want wives who participate, who get into it, and who feel something. And what we're realizing is our wives who have been circumcised, they can't get into it and they don't enjoy things. And we don't like that very much. And I said, well, too bad, right? And so how do you want us to help you? How do we fix the problem, essentially? And they said, well, we don't think more girls should be circumcised. We don't want our daughters to be circumcised, and we'll do anything in our power to ensure that our daughters don't suffer the way their mothers are suffering. There's a lot of empathy from our men. I mean, I'm not saying all men, but there has been, from what my opinion and what I have seen, there's a lot of empathy. The rest of them, they're just arrogant, you know, and they like things the way it was. It benefited them. And, you know, the whole aim of it was to control the sexuality of women, and they want to stand by that. But I think part of what the work we are doing is ensuring that we have those conversations with men and young men, like my sister said here, to ensure that this practice will stop at my generation. And we need to involve all parts of the community, fathers, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, everybody's business. It's all our problem. And our men are not an exception to it. So, yeah.
I'm Gay Casper. I'm a gynecologist. I've probably been a year older than you because I've been working in this space since 1995. So I'll assume that. There are several things that I've learned from working in the area, and two in particular I'd like to mention. One is that you must not just talk about genital mutilation or circumcision as a single thing, because then you're talking about anatomy. This is not about anatomy. It is not about beautification or non-beautification. It's not anatomy. It is about the power of a community over women. You cannot just discuss the mutilation of women, anatomical things. You've got to talk about in communities where they're destroying female fetuses, they're killing female babies, the girls are not going to school, they're getting mutilated, they're then forced into marriage at an early age, they get the fistulas, they live in a prison of a marriage, and when their husband dies, they're tortured. You've got to look at a whole community, not just the eyesight issue. And if we only deal with this as an anatomic issue, we're never going to be able to solve it in any community anywhere. And that's what I enjoyed about tonight. None of our speakers did not just talk about the anatomy of circumcision. They talked about the dynamics of being a woman in the community. And then the second thing is dealing with issues within Australia. And you've got not just female genital mutilation, you've got rape and incest within Australia. And what Australia does reasonably well is an acute service. You have acute rape, you have acute presentation. You have, in fact, in some areas, acute presentation of the problem of FGM and now inhuman pregnancy intercourse. There are services that are set up that will look at the anatomical issue. In the case of rape, they'll take the swabs, they'll deal with whatever. FGM, Auburn Hospital, Royal Hospital, women, lots of centres will deal with issues. What we do not do well is the long-term care of survivors, whether they are rape, incest, or FGM. Australia does not have the services, they do not have the planning, and they do not do this well. And this is where the women come in and get an anatomical reconstruction, but they're often re-traumatized by people who are not trained how to talk to people properly. They're not talking about the long-term care of these women, which is not just can't get reversed. Now you can have sex, now you can have babies. It's how are you feeling and what's going to happen with your life situation. I think that we need to deal with FGM in the same way that we need to deal with all survivors of sexual violence as well, and that is look at a long-term plan.
Oh, thank you. I know that's such a very valid point. Just to deal with one small aspect of it is not solving the issue. Yeah. What's the time for?
I just wanted to add something on what you said much before. I really like what you have said, because previously why the efforts against female genital circumcision have not made a lot of gains the way you would expect at this time is because we have taken it as an anatomical issue. And I think what is important is really to look at what are the root causes of this practice. Now, when you go deeply, you'll find it's not just for the sake of it, it's actually a power issue. It's the root cause of the problem is actually the men. Because when you get into certain communities, whether it's West Africa, whether it's wherever it is, whether it's East Africa, you will hear that it's the women who want to circumcise their girls. But there is a force behind it. And this force goes much, much, much deeper. If you read theories around, that were developed by people like Aristotle, for example, they will tell you that the reason they are fighting to cut the clitoris is because every woman has been born with a disability, with an ungrown penis, and they don't want that thing to shoot up. It has to go down, because it's about power, to make the power of the woman down, because they know the power of the woman, the head and the mind are so powerful. The only thing that they can defeat her to put all that power down is to get down there. And unless we understand to tackle the root cause of the problem, we will not. So we must go head on to target men in our advocacy, in our sensitization, always to bring them on board, fight patriarchy, for them to see that the FGC, or as we make, I mean, I would like to call it FGC, circumcision is not is killed totally. And the reason we say this, and the story that she gave, I want to also support her, because one time when we were doing some work for at some organization, we had a declaration, we had a testimony by a man, and we were training what we call the local administration, chiefs, governors, and we asked them in a group to tell us, who of you has not had a test of a woman who is not circumcised? And there was dead silence. You would have thought that actually the grave. And everybody kept quiet. Only for one man to raise his head and say, my father told me that if you go there, you will not come back, because it will be very sweet if you don't need to go back to your wife. And then all other men in that room said, actually, he has abandoned his home. He has gone to stay with that woman who is not circumcised, but has left the wife whom he forced that she has to be circumcised, even when she was not circumcised in her real married life. So you can see the whole problem, I'm just coming back to it, is actually about men. We must decolonize their mind. Remember my opening statement, we must decolonize their mind before we can even, the women will not have an issue. There are people that can come to the fore, but the men are the problem. We must mobilize resources. We must undertake advocacy around that issue, around men.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's such a good point, because the power is held by men. And, female circumcision is one example of what happens when you have gender inequality, but other forms of violence against women as well. So you're absolutely right. It's about power. That's why we need powerful men taking the message that female circumcision is just not on. And it's great to hear the examples of that. We've got time for one last question then.
Oh, sorry, I haven't jumped here.
Sorry. Do you want to just have a quick one then, because yours was first.
Oh, sure. I'm National Junior Labor. Just sort of two questions that go together. How at risk are the girls in Australia to get FGM, and what laws are in place to protect them here?
There are laws in place. There are laws in every state in their criminal jurisdiction. The law last year, as Michaela Cash said, there was a move from the federal government to make the laws consistent. In New South Wales, we had a law that said anyone who aided, abetted, procured, or performed circumcision on a girl could go to jail for up to 7 years. Last week, the New South Wales government put that jail sentence up to 21 years. We were the least in Australia. I have a problem with that. I seriously have a problem with that. You know why? It defeats the purpose. Putting a mother in jail for 21 years, is that going to do anything? Why don't we put the mother in community service to make sure that she speaks to every mother in her community? Every mother, even the ones who shoot her in her face, she should go and speak to them. We should make it hurt. 21 years is way too far. We should really make it hurt that woman. But anyway, we have a law for 21 years in New South Wales, and it's across the board in the whole of Australia. We have a law. The risk is pretty high. I'll tell you, there are women who say that they have become aware, they have understood the effects of FGM on their lives, they will not visit it on their children, sometimes their own husbands support them, but the older women, or the other women, the other men, the significant women in their families continue to ask them. There are phone calls every night from overseas. When are you bringing that child? I know my granddaughter is now at the age when they should be circumcised. Are you coming on holidays with them? So there's a lot of social pressure on families who have children in Australia to do it to the children. So the children are at risk, but whether it will be done or not, we don't know. That's why we need to ramp up the education.
I have evidence of that. Can I please give it? There's a girl in my community, and she told me a story where I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. Mom came home one day and said they were going to Africa. She was going to take her on a special trip. Instantly, she said to me, I knew something was fishy about this trip because throughout those years, I had done workshops on FGM and spoken about the threat that girls like her were under, regardless of the fact that they now live in Australia, to have FGM done to them. She said something just didn't sit right with her. So she told her dad about what she suspected would be a trip to go get FGM done to her. Dad called back home, talked to all the family members and said, I think this is what her mom wants to do. Please ensure that it doesn't happen. She's not left alone. They went there on the trip. Mom tried to kidnap her to get her circumcised. She came back and told us this story. That's how real the threat is, that's how possible it is, and that's how easily it could have got done.
Thanks for that. And just that final one there, it'll have to be very quick, sorry. But
my name's Sarah. I just wanted to ask Khadija a little bit more about those difficult conversations that you're having with men, because I've tried to talk to the men in my family about this and it's got shut down. So you say your uncles don't like you. Do you just go on with that? What do you do?
I don't really want to be their friend, and I really don't care about their opinion, to be honest, and that sounds terrible, but I'm a goal-oriented girl. I have a goal, which is to get the answer out of them, and it's not about whether they like me or not, it's about the fact that I think those conversations are so important, and I think they need to be challenged. But I do butter them up before I start. I just don't go into the deep end. So it starts with, oh, uncle, you are the best uncle I have ever had. You look after your wives and your daughters so well. And I want to talk to you about something that I think will help your daughters. And usually there's maybe a cupcake or some pepper soup that I have cooked, because they think women all they do is cook. But in this case, it works. Nice soup, bring it along, let's talk. And slowly we'll talk about, you must have been good with the girls, when you were young. Yeah, I'm sure you stopped once you met my auntie, and she was really good. Silly stuff like that, to just build rapport before we get into it. And then I'll say, there's some things in our community that's really beautiful. We have some wonderful cultural practices, and I'll name some of mine and say, what are some of yours? That usually opens up. If somebody's pro-FGM, they may bring it up. If they're against, they may still bring it up. So we talk about the pros, and then sometimes we talk about the negative, depending on which side of it they're sitting on. And if they bring it up, then I, of course, have to gauge. If they're for it, I want to actually know why they're for it. And then I'll go into discussions in how why they're for it and what is happening in their relationship around that. And if they're against it, that's when I warm up my hands, crack them up, and go, here we go, let's get into it. But to be honest with you, the heart of my discussion with these men is usually about love. It goes back to the fact that men are meant to protect, and I call on that instinct to protect. Protect your daughters, and be aware that this is a possibility. If you're against it, know that your daughter is in a real risk of this being done. If your wife comes home and says, I want to go home and I want to take our daughter with you, you better have that conversation, unless you want to deal with a whole lot of trouble once they get back. But to be honest with you, that is not an easy conversation you will ever have. Let's just say that. Don't go into it think it's going to be easy. But what is important is the fact that you know that what you're about to do is for good. To be honest with you, it is for the good that we challenge our men to think differently. They themselves have been programmed to think the way they do. We have to challenge that. And whatever tools you have to use, baby, to get that done, that's why you're a woman. You say
really exploring in a lot of detail this issue, having honest, authentic conversations led by our 4 exceptional panelists. I think, we've learned so much tonight. One of the things to take away is around language. We are survivors of female circumcision, and to really keep that language in our minds, and also to keep in our minds that actually we need to support those women who can be the most effective advocates about this in our community, and they're the women who are from the course and who really are courageous and have stories to tell, but also have such deep insights into what needs to change. And whether you're a woman who's had female circumcision or not, I know tonight we're united in our desire to work together to ensure that the next generation of women across the world doesn't experience what some of us have experienced. So thank you so much in leading us. And I do want to do a final thank you to Alison Agarwal, because Alison's got the night on tonight. We've got some drinks, a glass of wine or whatever. Join us up there for some further discussion. Thank you.